Thank you. Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Bell. I'm one of the co-founders of Tangent Animation. I think hopefully everyone's heard of NextGen, but we're here today to present some background, sort of behind the scenes imagery and a little bit about how we did certain things on NextGen utilizing Blender. Before I go forward, there was some people were stating that Tangent didn't do the work. Well, we did, all of it in Canada. Blender wasn't used for all of it. It was the majority of it was Blender, and just to be clear, we used a little bit of Substance Designer for painting, but we also used Blender. We used a little bit of Houdini for some of the water effects, and we used Fume effects for some of the particulate effects, and a tiny bit of Golem for some of the more directed crowd work. But the majority, I'd say 90 to 95% of the work was actually done in Blender. All animation, all layout, all lighting, all rendering was done in Blender. So I just want to put that to rest. So NextGen, how many people have seen it on Netflix? Cool, very nice. And general consensus, what do you think? You like it? Excellent. We actually love working with Netflix, and we hope we can do a lot more of these kind of shows with them. So a little bit of stuff on NextGen. There were, as a typical movie would have, it was 93 minutes, so there were approximately 1,300 shots in the show. 128 characters. That included obviously a bunch of the background characters and crowd characters and stuff like that. Close to 300 props. I think there were 100 sets in about 15 to 18 locations where we gathered the sets together. Average render time and cycles, thanks to people like Stefan Werner, stand up for a second. Stefan's here. He helped with a lot of the work on integrating things like Intel's Ombre, and optimizing things like the volumetric rendering. And hats off to everyone that worked on cycles, like Brecht and Sergey and Lucas. Just amazing work. It's a really fun, really incredible renderer. So we had, it was about 3.76 hours on average for render time. That was across our local workstations, plus Amazon, and we also rendered on Alibaba. So at one point, I think we had close to 4,000 nodes rendering in the last couple months. We had 3 versions of the movie. One of them was the 2D version for Netflix, and then we also had 2 versions for the Chinese market, stereo English and stereo Mandarin. So for stereo Mandarin, it was interesting. We came up with the render region inside of Blender. So we made that animatable, and we based it on locators in the scene. So we'd actually pick off like the face of the characters and just re-render that section and plaster it back on top of the English version to get the Mandarin version. So I think we did 300 to 350 shots animated in Mandarin. Yeah, and as I said, Blender utilized in all departments. So let's start off with the art department. I'll show some of the design concepts. The art department is also responsible for a lot of the HUDs. So actually another piece of software that we used, After Effects. The art department loved After Effects. So a lot of the HUDs, a lot of the 2D stuff was done in After Effects, but obviously rendered in cycles. So here we can see we've got, this is some of the early design concepts for 7723. We had an artist that previously worked at Disney, incredible 2D artist by the name of Charlie Bonifacio. So he went through and he sort of gave the rigging department, the modeling and art department some ideas about how we would want and how we would expect the characters to move. So you can see some of those concepts down at the bottom of the imagery. And this was sort of the result coming out of modeling. I think we talked a little bit about later, but there were 16 different versions of 7 in various states of destruction and so quite a complex character or a set of characters. Here's May. Again, some very, very early concepts of May. You can see the initial concept from Patrice. It kind of looks like the Gorillaz characters. And then, of course, we ended up with something that looked a little bit more like this at the end of it. And again, you can see more of Charlie's explorations of posing and silhouettes for May. And then our bad guys. So this is the sort of prototypical Apple executive, I guess you would call him. And again, some more explorations by Charlie. Charlie was a fantastic, fantastic animator to work with. Incredibly talented. And this is the other Apple executive. So you can see, like, the original concept for the character was quite different than what we ended up coming up with. When we recruited and finally signed David Cross, we decided to make the character more David Cross-like because he's quite a funny actor. And then there's everyone's beloved Momo. It's a bit of a show stealer, really. And May's mother. All right, so now we get into some of the concept art. A lot of this stuff was done by a gentleman by the name of Craig Sellers. So Craig was he was the production designer on Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2, and his work is incredible. So his basic concept behind the look of the show was to take it back to the late 70s, early 80s, and look at things like David Cronenberg-style movies, and have things like less theatrical designed lighting and more cinematic lighting, where it's okay if characters walk in and out of light, and we're not doing 3D vignettes specifically to try and focus people's attention in the scene. It was more cinematic, more live action. That carries all the way through to the way we handled the render, which I'll talk about later on. Some more concept pieces. So you can actually see some of this stuff in fact, I think we got pretty close to a lot of his concept artwork in the final 3D rendered imagery. An example of one of the model sheets that the art department creates for the modeling department. So some scene planning, some overall layout, scale references, and they supply an initial set of designs, and then depending on whether or not the modelers need additional detail here and there, they may supply other artwork as well. And an example of some of the prop stuff for the cars. The cars are all derivative of cars from the 70s. So I think, I don't know, can anyone figure out what car that is? Yeah. Now, it is a North American car. I don't know that many Pacers were sold over in Europe, but yeah, so some of them were derivative of some of the 70s American cars. Motion graphics. We did a lot of exploration on the art side on the motion graphics prior to actually going through and developing them in After Effects and in Blender. So here's an example of us going through an exploration of Seven's eyes, which we'll talk a little bit more about on the rigging part, and then also his heads-up display and the timer countdown for the second to penultimate sequence. And then we have color keys. So prior to going into lighting for, did I lose my mic? Am I still good? Prior to going into lighting for any particular sequence, the art director will take the concept artwork done by the production designer and actually come up with a sort of an overall concept for the sequence itself. We actually did a bunch of pre-lighting on the show, all the way up at the layout and previs stage. So they would take that sort of low-res pre-lit work and draw on top of that and sketch and paint on top of that to provide targets for the lighting team. And this is an example of one of the keys for, and we're going from sequence 80, there's some sequence 130 stuff in here. Yeah. The art director on the show was a gentleman by the name of Richard Chen, incredibly talented individual. And some of the stuff towards the end. So you can see we love our We love our flares, we love our atmospherics, which I think contributed a lot to the overall look and feel of the movie. There were volumetrics everywhere. So obviously, like a lot of the work that Stefan and others did to try and optimize cycles were very, very important for this movie. All right, so modeling. The original models were a combination of ZBrush sculpted models and sculpting done in Blender. So that's where we got our artistic approvals prior to actually retopologizing the stuff, which we actually used RetopoFlow add-on for. There was sort of a feedback loop between the departments. It wasn't just the art department that needed to know what was going on in modeling. Obviously, it's also surfacing and rigging, so there was a lot of back and forth between all of those departments. And then the environments were roughed in during the layout and previous stage so that we would quickly block in things that were required to get the sort of compositions that we wanted. And then we knew the scale and placement and other things for the assets that were required. Those were then turned into an asset within the scene in our asset manager, and the modelers would eventually replace them with linked assets. So the scene basically started populating itself with the final assets. We used Grove. Is there anyone from the Grove team here? There you go. Stand up. So Grove is a fantastic add-on for creating trees. We use that to basically generate we called it kind of like our nursery, where we would generate the trees, and then we had some tools to algorithmically place trees and through instancing, and to try and keep basically our in-scene poly counts very low so that it was easy for animators and lighters to use it and for the renderer to deal with it. So. And then modifier stacks, we tended to bake them down just for performance reasons, but obviously all the characters also had subdivision surfaces on them. So some examples of some model sheets from the show. Here's 7 with, again, some art concepts, and then the final resulting geometry. He was an incredibly complex character for a hard surface character. Again, he had 16 different destruction versions, but then he also had all these packs that had to be added onto him at different parts of the movie. So he didn't carry all these weapons throughout the whole movie. We had other assets that would get linked in and connected to him as we needed it. So when he needed like his hand weapon or his missiles or some of the other packs, that stuff would actually get linked in as we needed them. A concept for his arm. So this was kind of a back and forth between the art department, animation, rigging, and modeling. So here we have a kind of an explanation coming out of the art department as to how they wanted the bits and pieces to move and which parts needed to be mobile. So his hand actually goes from a hand to like this set of claws that all the fingers can basically turn around his palm. It was a really, really complex and really interesting rig. And here's basically some of the motion that we got out of the arm. This is all done with drivers and Blender, so there was very little work for the animators to do to get this thing to actually do what they wanted. And here's Aries. It was interesting story about Aries. Who likes Gundam robots, like the big, crazy robots? So as we're going through the movie, Aries, which is probably 3 times the size of the largest other character, which is 7, it was determined that he wasn't big enough. So the art director created this whole new add-on for Aries, this suit that this giant Aries character steps into to make him twice as big. So, and here's again a model sheet you can see on the right-hand side. That's what came from the art department. And there's the rough version coming out of modeling on the left-hand side. Surfacing, so Substance Painter was used for a lot of it, but Blender was also used. I'd say Blender was used more for the environments and props. Substance Painter was used for the characters, and then whatever work was done in Substance Painter was then also supplemented on the Blender side. May and 7, tons of different versions. They went through May had, she had a bruise on her face. She got dusty as she went through the movie. Seven had like 16 different versions of him. All of these basically had to be, we had them contained in one file, and that one file acted as the master file to create all the different versions of him that got referenced into the various shots. We found that the windows in the buildings looked a little flat, but we didn't want to build the interior of all these buildings, so we came up with this little hack, little trick, use Z-depth and messing with the vector transform to create, I wouldn't call it accurate or realistic or anything like that, but it created some depth to the windows. So I've got a little movie I'll show in a second. And then, of course, all the materials were physically based. We really wish we could use the principal BSDFs in the 279, and we're definitely looking forward to doing that. We're going to move to that as soon as we possibly can. But in the meantime, we basically use our own PBR materials for next gen. So here's an example of a surfacing sheet coming out of our art department. You can see, they're basically pulling real-world reference for the various surfaces on the character. And here's basically an example of a turntable that we would do for any of the characters in the movie. So this is what we would do to get approvals. There's a few frames here that are missing. We also show the characters under different lighting conditions. We had a standard set of 5 different lighting conditions that we would show them under, so that we were assured that the surfaces and the materials would react as we expected them to. But that's the nice thing about using physically based materials. You do that and you get very, the results are almost always what you expect. You don't get weird, specular or diffuse responses out of the materials and things like that. So it was a big boon to the production to use the PBR workflows. We also used, I don't think I mentioned it earlier on, but we used the filmic transform and worked in a linear color space. All right, so before I show the movie, this is all we did for the interiors, like a super stupid, silly little hack, but I'll show you the results. And it created a little bit of interest inside the buildings, a little bit of depth where we actually had nothing on the interiors. So again, not hyper realistic, but it was convincing enough that you ignored it in the scene, right? You didn't care that there was nothing in the interiors. So very cheap, very simple. Then we get to rigging. So a couple rigging challenges I'll talk about directly. There was the Seven's eyes ghosting. So we had about a 3-frame lag on Seven's eyes when they would move around. So we did that basically with sort of drivers and expressions, referencing the animation blocks, but delayed. And then the other one was the pixelated eyes on the Qbots. So this was an add-on that we developed that projected geometry and curves onto surfaces and generated texture maps in the Cycles material network. So those textures, we then just used some standard techniques to get them pixelized. So I'll show you the results of that. Just an example of one of the rigs in the movie. Now there's obviously a ton of controls here, but you can turn, once you grab the top node of the character, you can actually turn various portions of the control rigs on and off, and you can go from super simple for blocking to more detailed on different sections of the character. Most of the time, the facial animation controls are actually not visible, so all these controls can be turned on and off as you needed them. And that resulted in this in the movie. A bit of a culmination of the work that was done for his arm through the various departments as well. And here's the Qbot's eyes. So all this stuff was generated procedurally. There was no actual textures for any of the eyes. It was all just based on geometry and curves. Here you can see he's at a fairly high res, so we wanted the Cubot 6s, which are the newer versions, to have a much higher res look than the Cubot 5s. They actually have exactly the same facial rig. You can see here, as we go through, we're actually de-resing it, but it's the same rig. All we do is we change one parameter in our material network, and we get a more pixelized version of it. We also had different color variations too, and again, that was just another node in the material network. So it was robot really, really useful for all of the robots that we had in the movie. And then, yeah, there's the Atari 2600 version. Wonder how long it would take to render on a 2600. Layout and previs. So we did some interesting thing with layout and previs. We tried to do things like basically do a pre-visualization, almost like a visual effects movie, where we would actually previs with stand-in geometry, temporary visual effects for timing. And we tried to do a little bit more animation blocking in our layout and previs to try and get to a point where we sort of knew what movie we were making even prior to making it. So to show you a movie that describes this in a little more detail, sort of walks you through the stages of previs all the way through to final animation.
Okay, fine. Maybe I'll start.
There should be some audio.
Did he just explode?
Thanks.
I gotta go back! Get my mom!
Okay, fine. Maybe I'll start.
Hey guys! Did he just explode? I gotta go back! Get my mom! Hey!
Okay, fine. Whose dog is this?
Hey guys! Did he just explode? We gotta go back. We gotta get mom.
Okay, fine. Whose dog is this?
Hey guys! Did he just explode? We gotta go back. We gotta get mom.
Yeah, thank you very much. That sequence was that sequence was deadly. I think the camera move in that was 2.5 minutes long, and we had to find clever places to sort of cut it up so that we get multiple people working on it at the same time. But it was a very, very interesting sequence. It's probably one of the most complex sequences in the whole movie, even though the big fight sequence at the end seems like a big one. This one was also extremely complex. But the takeaway from this is we try to do as much as we can, as soon as we can, to get a better feel for what it is that we're actually trying to produce. And then we hope that what we're doing is we're plussing the movie all the way along. So animation workflow, pretty typical as in most studios. Get a director launch, they do video reference for the work they're about to do. They block it, so basically just keyframes and timing, no in-betweens and no overlap and no splining. Once that's approved, we go through a spline process, and that's where we get our final approvals on animation. And I'll also show we had 3 different versions of every character in terms of the rigs. So the armature was exactly the same for all 3, but the low-res one had no deformations whatsoever, even on the face. And it was super fast and easy to block stuff with. The mid-res we had basically cut the face out from the characters So you only had the face in high res, which allowed you to do facial animation with the rest of the animation in a faster fashion. And then the final one was the high res version. So
Yeah, you are.
so here's the low res, no deformations whatsoever.
Hey, you're definitely
No!
not allowed in there, sweetheart.
I'm not
Nope.
your sweetheart, you creep.
Quit squirming.
Wait, my bag. Yeah, you are.
Okay, and then this is the medium res,
you
where only the
are
face
delusional.
is high res, and the rest of it is, we call it Tootsie
you're
Rolls.
definitely
No!
not allowed in there, sweetheart.
I'm not
Nope.
your sweetheart, you creep.
Quit squirming.
Wait, my bag. Yeah,
Okay, and then obviously the final
Yeah.
high res,
You
which is
are
fully
Hey,
Deforming?
you're definitely
No!
not.
and then the final result.
yeah, you are delusional.
Hey, you're definitely not allowed in there, sweetheart.
I'm not your sweetheart, you creep.
Quit squirming.
Wait. Yeah, you.
So a lot of this was managed by, hold on, go back here. A lot of this was managed by our asset manager in terms of resolution swapping and things like that. So we built a whole asset manager around Blender. All right, so the next part is showing the workflow and then the process from beginning to end. So I'm gonna, I think Eric knows that I'm showing this to the internet, but here's his animation reference.
How are you doing? Look at you. All right. This is great. Hey, check out those tech specs, huh? Pretty impressive. I mean, even I'm impressed. I don't work here, so. Folks, this year.
Can you see me? Can you hear me all right? Hey, how you doing?
So here's the layout version that takes his
All right.
performance into account.
Great. Hey, check out those tech specs, huh? Pretty impressive. I mean, even I'm impressed that I work here. So, folks, this year's line.
Okay, and the animation blocking pass, again, no splining yet.
Hey, check out those tech specs, huh? Pretty impressive. I mean, even I'm impressed that I work here. So,
Okay, spline version of it. Again, constant refinement as we go through the process.
this is great. Hey,
And then that results in the final animated piece here. Unfortunately, I don't know why I don't have audio for this one, but that sort of shows and describes the process of how we go through each one of these shots as we animate them. And you can see there's a lot of Eric's performance in that final animation. Visual effects was interesting, very much a mishmash of, I'd say probably 50% Blender, and the rest of it was Fume Effects and Houdini. Fume Effects was used to generate a lot of what we called library effects elements. So we made many improvements. Luca Rude, who I don't think is here, Luca Rude did a bunch of things for us on VDB import and Alembic import, and Stefan Werner did a bunch of stuff to help with the rendering of VDBs and stuff like that. So we basically pre-generated a bunch of VDB caches that we then ran through material networks on the cycle side in order to get a lot of our visual effects. So when you see explosions in the movie, the scenes are actually lit by the explosions volumetrically. So those were some of the most expensive scenes to render in the show. I would say, if you took all that stuff out, we probably averaged maybe less than 2 hours per frame render time. It was all these big effect sequences that killed us. Water, we did some water with Blender. In fact, a lot of the sort of background motion we did with Blender. The one that we did in Houdini that was big was the sequence in the tunnel where Seven sort of flies through the water. So that was actually done in Houdini with the flip solver. I actually would have loved to have used the new flip add-on, but it wasn't available at the time in Blender. So. All right, so take a look at some of the concept artwork for Aries Tesla Beam. So we also combined a lot of volumetric effects with a lot of 2D effects, so a lot of painted effects, a lot of geometry with animated textures on them. So it was a combination of 3D volumetrics and 2D textures to give us a bit of an anime style feel to a lot of the effects which the directors wanted. So here's the art department concept. Here's some early tests. And then we have the final result in the scene itself. So again, about half 2D, half 3D. But yeah, it was a very, very challenging movie on the visual effects side. I think the most challenging, if I were to pick one shot in the movie that was the most challenging, there was a shot in the stadium where we had, I think, 17 volumetric explosions. We had close to 20,000 characters in the crowd. We had 3 main characters and volumetric lighting as well. It was, yeah, don't ask the render time on that one. So lighting, again, I talked a little bit about the physically based rendering workflows. A lot of live action concepts in this. The directors love like older movies like Blade Runner and some of the movies from the 70s and 80s. So we rendered everything, except where we couldn't get the thing rendered because it required too much memory. Everything was rendered in camera in one pass. So part of that too was, again, Stefan with his work on integrating cryptomats and with help from others at the Blender Institute as well. Cryptomats were a huge boon for us because we were able to render everything in camera and then make small adjustments afterwards in the Compositor. People were speculating as to what we used for a Compositor. We used Blender. You know, in our estimation, it's really only missing a few things, and it's mainly with regards to performance. So we'll probably work on that sometime in the next year or so. But it was perfectly more than suitable for what we required for the movie. Partially because we did everything in camera too, so our compositing networks are actually relatively simple. We sort of broke it up into world-based stuff, lens-based stuff, and then final output. And I think I have an image of that coming up. So some art department to concepts, and then what resulted in the final movie, the final imagery in the movie. And again, concept, and then what the lighting department came up with. And then here's the process itself. So the different lighting steps that we went through, and then some of the compositing work that goes on top of it. And another example here, you can see more of our effects work, because we love our glows and glares. So an interesting side note, the whole movie had lens distortion on it. It also had lots of chromatic aberration, which we added in the Compositor. We had to remove all the lens distortion for the 3D versions because it was creating some crazy 3D artifacting, where your eyes were trying to resolve the 3D image, and it kind of was, but you had these, especially out towards the corners, the 3D was not actually resolving correctly, so we had to take all of the 3D stuff off. But yeah, you can see, this is all in camera. And all one pass. But yet we still have mats for everything via the cryptomats. All right, and just to show you how simple the compositing networks were, this is the compositing network for that shot. So file in, image loader. We do have all the passes available, but typically we'd use just the beauty pass, and if we needed to modify something, we would extract that particular pass, change it, and then add it back in. So we tried to keep the compositing networks as light as possible. And we divided it into basically, like I said, the input stuff, the world-based stuff, volumetrics, et cetera, lens effects, and then final output. And yeah, how am I doing for time? Yeah? All right, I'm going to show the teaser, and if we still have a few minutes, maybe I can. How about 2 minutes? Do you have enough for the teaser? Or should I ask questions? Okay. All right, so I'll show you the teaser, and thank you for attending.
Hello.
All right. Thanks very much, and we look forward to continuing to contribute to Blender, and I thank the Blender Foundation and Institute for their fantastic piece of software.